When players first boot up Skyrim, they're not greeted by a grand city, a sprawling wilderness, or even a dungeon filled with treasure. Instead, the journey begins in a small, unassuming settlement called Helgen. It seems like a normal Nordic town, quiet streets, timber-framed houses, a keep that hints at a martial history. For a fleeting moment, it feels like this might be the player's first hub of Skyrim, the place where you'll find quests, shops, and NPCs. But in the very same breath, Helgen is annihilated. Within minutes of meeting its guards, its residents, and its structures, the town is engulfed in fire and chaos. Alduin, the World Eater himself, descends from the skies and obliterates the settlement in an event that forever changes the world. By the time you escape through Helgen Keep, the town you started in is nothing more than charred ruins. Why did Bethesda design the game this way? Why introduce us to a town only to immediately erase it? And why Helgen specifically? A settlement with a surprising amount of history, legacy, and lore behind it. Before its fiery introduction in Skyrim, Helgen already had history. The settlement existed as far back as the Elder Scrolls 1, where it was described as a modest mountain town in the Falkreath Hold. Positioned along the road between Riverwood and Falkreath, Helgen had little to distinguish itself from other settlements beyond its strategic location. By the 4th era, Helgen is a small but thriving community. It boasts a blacksmith, an inn, and several Nordic-style homes, suggesting a life of quiet stability. Its keep and walls give it the appearance of a fortified outpost, perhaps once serving a more militarized role during earlier conflicts. It seems more symbolic than functional. What makes Helgen unique, however, is not its economy, but its placement in the story of Skyrim itself. It is deliberately ordinary. When you arrive as a prisoner, the cobblestone streets look like any other Nordic town, filled with simple villagers going about their lives. Bethesda wants you to see Helgen as just another place in Skyrim, so that its destruction feels immediate and personal. Helgen is also the stage for Skyrim's opening execution sequence. As the Dragonborn, you're carted in with Stormcloak rebels, lined up against the chopping block and prepared to die. The execution is more than just a narrative setup. It tells us about the fractures within Skyrim. Ulfric Stormcloak is there, gagged but defiant, a living symbol of the rebellion. The Imperial Legion, led by General Tullius, is equally present, showing the weight of the Empire's control. Helgen becomes the perfect backdrop for this moment, because it is a neutral ground, not Solitude, not Windhelm, but a small town in the Falkreath Hold, far from either side's capital. And then, just as the axe is about to fall, Alduin arrives. The timing is too perfect to ignore. Helgen becomes the place where history pivots. Without its destruction, the Dragonborn dies as an anonymous prisoner. The prophecy is unrealized, and Alduin's plan to consume the world continues unchecked. Helgen had to be destroyed because it is both the site of an execution and the site of deliverance. Its burning is what transforms you from prisoner to hero. One of the strangest mysteries about Helgen is why Alduin attacked at all. Out of all of the Skyrim cities, Solitude, Whiterun, Windhelm, why this small, insignificant town? Lore offers no definitive answer, but several theories circulate. Symbolic timing. Alduin's return coincides with the Dragonborn's presence. By attacking Helgen, Alduin interrupts your execution, setting in motion the events that led to his eventual defeat. In turn, the whole of Skyrim's story. It is almost as though fate ensured Alduin would appear there. Practical target. Helgen is small, undefended, and remote. Alduin's attack demonstrates his power and minimal risk. He incinerates the town easily, spreading fear without directly challenging the major holds. Narrative necessity. From a design standpoint, Bethesda needed a controlled environment. Helgen provides that. A walled town where the chaos of a dragon attack can be showcased without overwhelming the player. In the end, Helgen's destruction is less about strategy and more about destiny. It is the spark that lights Skyrim's narrative on fire. Helgen Keep plays a crucial role in the player's first hours. As Alduin burns the town above, you flee into the fortress beneath, guided by either Ralof of the Stormcloaks or Hadvar of the Imperials. This dual escape route reinforces the game's central choice: Empire or Rebellion. Inside the keep, you fight your first battles, find your first gear, and get a glimpse at the mechanics of combat, sneaking, and looting. The keep is not just a tutorial dungeon, it is also a graveyard. Imperial soldiers and Stormcloaks lie dead together, victims of the chaos. Torture chambers hint at the darker sides of the Imperial justice. The tunnels, crumbling and filled with frostbite spiders, has decay at its roots. When you finally emerge into the sunlight, the scale of Helgen's destruction becomes clear. Smoke rises in the distance, a permanent scar that lingers in the landscape for the rest of the game. Helgen has served its purpose, and now it is nothing more than a ruin. Unlike other places in Skyrim, Helgen is never rebuilt. Its ruins remain smouldering, looted, and haunted by bandits and wildlife for the rest of the game. This permanence is unusual. Other towns and villages like Whiterun, which can come under attack during the Civil War, recover and continue to function. But Helgen stays dead. Its ashes are a constant reminder of Alduin's return and the fragility of Skyrim's settlements. Modders have often stepped in to restore Helgen, creating quests that rebuild the town or repopulate its streets. But in the vanilla game, Bethesda leaves it empty. This emptiness is somewhat deliberate. It makes Helgen a memorial, a frozen moment in time that says, this is what happens when dragons return. While the Dragonborn escapes Helgen, its ordinary citizens do not. The innkeeper, the blacksmith, nameless guards all perish in Alduin's assault. Few players stop to think about these characters, but their deaths are part of what gives Helgen its tragic weight. Consider Alvor, the blacksmith in Riverwood. He mentions Helgen, speaks of the smoke, and worries about what it means. To him, Helgen wasn't just a place on the map, it was a neighbouring community, filled with people he likely knew. For the Nords of the Folkreath Hold, Helgen's destruction is more than a spectacle. It's a tragedy, a warning that their villages could be next. By erasing Helgen, Bethesda reminds us that Skyrim is not a static world. It is fragile, breakable, and marked by sudden, irreversible loss. What makes Helgen unique among Skyrim's many locations is how deeply it lingers in the player's memory. You may forget the names of distant caves or small hamlets, but you never forget Helgen. It is your first sight of Skyrim, your first taste of danger, and your first escape. It is where you see Alduin's wings blot out of the sky, where you feel the vulnerability of being powerless against a dragon. Helgen endures not because of what it is, but because of what it represents: beginnings, endings, and the strange way loss can define a journey. Helgen is not the only destroyed settlement in Tamriel, but it is the one that's the most deliberate. Kvatch in Oblivion was also annihilated early in the game, setting the stage for the Daedric invasion. Yet, Kvatch was larger, grander, and tied to the Oblivion crisis. Helgen, by contrast, is smaller and more intimate. Its destruction feels less like a spectacle and more like personal tragedy. Other Skyrim villages, such as Karthwasten or Darkwater Crossing, feel fragile, but they still endure. Helgen, however, is singled out for total annihilation. In doing so, it becomes Skyrim's most haunting ghost town, forever caught in its own moment of destruction. One of the strangest curiosities about Skyrim's world is that Helgen is the only settlement in the entire game that is completely destroyed. Other villages suffer poverty, raids, or political neglect, but none are razed to ash like Helgen. Riverwood, only a short walk away, survives countless dragon attacks. Small hamlets such as Darkwater Crossing or Stone Hills may be vulnerable, yet they endure. Nothing really happens to them. Even settlements closer to dragon lairs, like Kyne's Grove, remain intact despite the ongoing crisis. The reason lies in Helgen's symbolic purpose. Its destruction is not about realism or the natural spread of dragon attacks, but about narrative necessity. If a town like Riverwood or Ivarstead had been destroyed, the player would lose access to key quests, crafting stations, and role-playing hubs. If a major city like Whiterun burned, It would break Skyrim's balance of power. Helgen was expendable, big enough to feel real, but detached enough that the player's progression wouldn't be disrupted by its absence. Thus, Helgen's destruction stands alone. It was chosen not because of geography or weakness, but because the story needed a single sacrificial settlement to announce the return of dragons. And Helgen, unlucky Helgen, bore that weight. Helgen is the settlement that had to be destroyed, not because it was strategically vital, not because its people deserve their fate, but because its loss is what transformed Skyrim's story from background politics into an epic prophecy. It is a place built to burn, a town designed to be lost, and in its ashes the Dragonborn is born. Even now, more than a decade after Skyrim's release, players remember Helgen. They remember the cart ride, the chopping block, and the dragon's roar. They remember running through fire and stone, fleeing into the darkness of the keep. They remember looking back, just once, to see a town that was already gone. The curious case of Helgen is not simply that it was destroyed. The curious case of Helgen is not simply that it was destroyed, but because it had to be. Without its fall, Skyrim's story could never rise.